Minister, goes far.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I want to first thank you on my first visit to Toronto as a speaker. I'm grateful for the reception that we received. I'm grateful for the way it was reported this morning in the Toronto Star. And I thank you very, very much for your attendance and for your kindness in reporting what I said. It's deeply appreciated. I want you to feel free to ask any question of me that you so desire, because I know much has been written of me, although I don't really know what the Canadians have heard, but I do know that there's quite a lot of controversy which seems to follow me everywhere I go. So I want you to feel free to ask any question you so desire. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Farrakhan, Bill Hutchison, CFTL. Let's deal first of all with the controversy. The Canadian Jewish Congress sought to prevent you from even coming into this country. Your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, it evidently is because of fear, but I think that when I came to the country, they mentioned to me that fear, and they mentioned to me the law, and they gave me a copy of the statute, and I told them that I would not come into this country to offend the laws, and if I thought that my speech would offend the law, then I would not speak. I gave them my word that I would not offend the law or offend any group in the society, but I would do my best to speak the truth from the spirit of love and hope that all of us who are incorrect might correct ourselves to gain the favor of God. And so I hope that a dialogue with members of the Jewish community can be had. We've been seeking it for 12 years without preconditions. And if members of the Jewish community can show me where I have erred in my statements, then I'm not too big to apologize to them if I have erred. But that cannot even be done if there is no dialogue. And I think it's the intelligent and the civilized thing to do. So I'm glad that the immigration authorities permitted me to come in, and I hope that they will permit me to come again. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Justin Thomas.
Yes, sir.
And Sister Cynthia Mohammed said we had a chat, and she said it's very important that I come to the press conference and share a very brief story and ask you a question. In 1971, after having been exposed to horrific abuse as a child and peeling away the labels of retard and all the things that were imposed on me as the family, in quotes, nigger, I did a one-person play which I entitled How I Overcame My Fear of Whores, Royalty, Gays, Teachers, Hippies, Athletes, Police, Children, Psychiatrists, Politicians, Celebrities, Gurus, Grandparents, Mothers, Fathers, Blacks, Yellows, Reds, Whites, you and myself, okay? Myself and you. And what happened is I was asked to speak in place of Rabbi Feinberg, who was an eminent peace rabbi at the University of Toronto, along with 2 Arab delegates. When I got there, the Arab gentlemen were talking about their certain resentments that they were feeling. And I passed out a button which says, I'm a person first, ... second, label liberation. In other words, if anyone has to label anyone anything second, that's their problem. Okay? The two Arab gentlemen took the buttons, the moderator took the buttons. I presented a very condensed cycle, a journey, to labor liberation. When I finished, the two Arab gentlemen came over and hugged me, and the moderator said, "We can't have this. Get back to the business at hand." And there was silence, and then everyone started laughing, except for the moderator, because we had gotten to the business at hand. There was nothing left to moderate. The two Arab gentlemen invited me to dinner. The moderator wouldn't shake my hand goodbye, and the next day, a lady friend Alicia and I were at the rabbi's, and he said, "What did you say, Justin? I heard the Arabs came over and hugged you. Haven't you gone too far?" And I said, "Too far for who? Are you a person first or Jewish first? Are you a rabbi first or a person first?" And he pointed to his gray hair and said, "Well, I'm too old to understand this." And I said, "Age is a state of mind, and that's not a platitude." And my question to you is, I heard some of your tapes while living in the United States. I haven't personally heard anything that had any way criticism of individuals as people. And I would like to ask you, do you, from what I experienced last night, you were embracing and nurturing, and you spoke to what I believe is critical, to see people beyond all the projections, to come out of the hypnosis that most of us are trapped in, to come out of the group identification that labels and categorizes and caricatures people. Do you believe that you are a person first?
Well, it depends on what you mean by person. If you mean, do I believe that I and all human beings are created in the image and the likeness of God, and that we have inalienable rights to evolve to become reflections of God. I believe that I, as well as you, and every human being is that and has that potential. We either rise to become what God has created us to be based upon the institutions that shape us and the environment that shapes us. We have certain hereditary characteristics, some that may be good, some that may not be good, but environment can nullify negative characteristics if the environment is wholesome. And environment can feed good characteristics if that environment is wholesome. So each of us as human beings should try to rise to become human. And you rise to become human when you rise up out of the flesh to look at this as the house in which you live temporarily and become master over your nationality, your race, your culture, and then go beyond that to embrace others that are not of your nationality or race or color or creed. That kind of growth is what the planet needs now. And I should hope that in my evolutionary process that I am growing not only to be proud of myself as a black person and thankful to God that He created me as He did, but to rise beyond that into the universal truth that would allow me to accept all human beings and treat every person as I wish to be treated myself. And that is my hope, that I am arriving to that place in my life. by the grace of God.
Thank you. Very
Thank you.
Make your question.
Yeah, Dana O'Brien, CFRB Radio. Mr. Farrakhan, you said that you didn't come here to offend any laws or any group. Is this a departure in your approach? Have you changed your approach? Because in the past you have offended groups and
You
laws.
know, here in these so-called offenses, you must put it in context. Most of you in the media seem to think this is a one-sided affair. And I think you're being very unfair to me, and you're capitulating to forces that are anti-Farrakhan when it was not I who attacked the group. It was they who attacked me when I was appealing for peace and dialogue over the Jesse Jackson campaign. And it was I who was labeled a black Hitler. And I took offense at those words, and that's when I would say the argument heated up between us. When I went to New York in 1985, and over 25,000 people appeared at Madison Square Garden, I never spoke one word to the media. Mayor Koch, who is Jewish, called me a devil, called me a Hitler. And the media pumped it up day after day after day, just like they did here before I spoke a word. So now when I defend myself against such attacks and point out the error in those who attack me vis-a-vis the relationship between blacks and Jews, all of a sudden now they have done nothing. They have said nothing. And I'm the one that has to apologize. And when I don't come crawling on my knees as all of you do when they charge you with anti-Semitism, then now I am the fella that's the culprit. For instance, I mentioned last night, if the law says that I am not permitted to utter hateful speech against any group or any person willfully, what has been written of me willfully? What is the real truth? Why should I be blocked from coming into a country because somebody said I am a hate monger? Did you hear me? Do you know me? But because the power of the group is reflected in the media and in the society, then I come as the bad fella. See? So I don't appreciate that. Not at all. And if you're fair-minded, you shouldn't appreciate it either. But of course, the question is, who is fair today? When a black man stands up to speak his mind, he's not afraid, he's unfettered, all of a sudden, white folk get frightened because you don't control me. And that's what's wrong in the society. You can't write what you really think. You can't say what you really feel if your editors don't like what you say. And there's too much fear, and this is what's driving the world, in my judgment, to hell. And I refuse to bow to that. But I'm a human being, and if they can show me where I am in error over anything I said, not what they allege that I said, but over what I said, then I am a humble person who will apologize to them, not in secret, but I'll go in the forum where I have made the error. But how can you show me where I have erred if you refuse to even talk with me? And that no-talk policy, which was the policy between the members of the Jewish community or leadership and Arafat. Now you're talking with Arafat over rivers of blood. Thanks be to God, there is no blood between us and the Jewish community. So why not sit down? I'm not going to go away. And God forbid that some foolish person attempts to take my life because the media has projected me as some horrible fellow, and then somebody thinks they're doing God a favor by removing me, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that, not only from the people, but from God. So I think you should be fair. If you really think I'm that, then say it. But if somebody else is influencing you to say that, then you should look to the other side and give some balance here. I have a side to this story. You never heard me. You get a 30-second bite on television. That is not me. You get a little dossier from the ADL, which literally takes my words out of context, even twists them to make a point. And it is this that is sent to the immigration authorities to keep me out of a country. I haven't broken any laws in the United States of America. I'm nearly 64 years old, and I have never been arrested in my life for any crime. Why shouldn't I be allowed to come into this country and speak to my people and your people if your people would wish to hear what I have to say? That is wrong. That is wrong. And I can't go along with that. Thank you for your question. Yes, sir.
Doug Beaumont from Chum Radio. Is the negative media coverage then, sir, in your opinion, intentional, or are you being misinterpreted?
Well, whether it's intentional or not, I thank the media for what they've done, because you've made me known all over the world, and I appreciate it. And it's up to me to go now and straighten out the lies. Everybody knows me from the media, but they really don't know me. So when they hear me and they see me and they feel me, then they go away saying, why did the media say this? And really it turns the people against my critics when they get to meet me in person. Yeah. So I would say sometimes writers are very honest in their criticism of me. I give them that. Sometimes they write out of fear. And then sometimes they write with a specific motivation to turn the people away from me and to put a veil over me that will forbid the people from seeing me for who I really am. And this is not new. Paul Robeson suffered this. W.E.B. Du Bois suffered this. Malcolm suffered this. Martin suffered this. There's Mandela suffered this. Every black leader that you now make a hero, go back and see what the press said about them when they were fighting for their people. The press has never spoken good for the liberation strugglers of our people. Whether it's the Canadian press, the British press, the French press. How did you view those who struggled for liberation when they were struggling against your own tyranny? You wrote against them just like you write against me. And it's time for the madness to stop, because the people are going to know the truth, and the truth is going to set the people free. Then the people will turn on the media and turn on the leaders. Is this what you want? Because it's coming. Yes, sir.
Do you think your message is pertinent to blacks in Canada, as pertinent to blacks in Canada as it is to blacks in the United States, given the difference in the history of the countries?
You know, the message to black people is universal. I haven't met a black man anywhere on the earth who's not suffering in some way from what the Western world and our own ignorance has placed us in. And so the message is universally accepted by black people. Yes, the experience in Canada is much different than the American experience, certainly. But these people didn't come in a vacuum, you know, and the thing that you all must see, you know, most white folk think that you are not haters, you're really not racist, and you want to believe you're liberals, and that's really good. But people don't really know who and what they are until circumstances manifest them to themselves. Right now in Britain, in France, in Finland, in Norway, in Sweden, in Germany, in Italy, wherever, and in Russia, and even in China, where you find black people coming in greater numbers and then mixing with the whites of that nation. Now hostilities are growing in all of these countries toward the black population, right here in Canada. What is the real feeling of the white Canadian toward the black residents? Why do the blacks feel that racism exists here? Certainly not to the level that it exists in America, because we're not to the numbers that we exist in America. We're over 40 million in America. The numbers here are much smaller, but the more those numbers rise, it brings out of you things that you didn't even know you had. No, so you're really not all that you think you are, and we're showing you that you're not all that you think you are, and you need a doctor. The whole world needs a doctor, and that's the role that I'm trying to play in administering some very painful medicine, but Lord, you know, it'll flush you.
Are you suggesting racism will rise here in Canada then? That we're heading
I'm
the same road that the US
suggesting, sir,
is?
that racism is on the rise in Canada simply because of the growth of the black population and incidents of crime and violence in the society. You never had these problems before. When I was a teenager, I was in Quebec singing at that time in Montreal. And there were just a few black people in Quebec. And our presence, you know, the whites just seemed to adore us. We were something different, you know. And the white women fell all over the few little black men that came. But look at France now. France used to be a paradise for black musicians and black entertainers and black artists. It's getting difficult today in France, in England, in Germany. So yes, the racism will rise as the numbers increase and the condition economically worsens. Racism does tend to get worse.
This gentleman here in the back.
Tom Godfrey from the Toronto Sun. I just want to ask you two things. You're talking about the different experience between blacks here and the U.S. I just want you to explain that a little bit. And also, as far as your World Friendship Tour, where do you go now? What happens next? What's your next stopover?
Let me say, you know that the blacks here have never suffered what the blacks in the United States have suffered. But even the children here who are from Caribbean parents, they bear the scars of the same slavery that the blacks in America have endured. The Canadian black doesn't wear his own name, doesn't speak his own language, hardly knows his culture or his history, and suffers from that self-defeating, low self-esteem and a black inferiority. And this causes problems within our own community. And Canadian education doesn't address the illness that is in the black community. And that's why the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is so important, because it addresses the ills that we suffer, and it removes or begins the process of removing the scars that we have suffered in our enslavement in the Caribbean as well as in all parts of the diaspora. So most of the black Canadians have come here from the Caribbean or are of Caribbean parentage, and they suffer the same scars that we have in America that are still existent in the Caribbean. And I'm sorry, Canadian education and religion and college and all the niceties do not suffice in terms of ridding black people of the scars of slavery. That has to be done today, and that is the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, and that is the work that I'm hoping to do so that we can re-enter the human family on a level of equality. we'll never be equal until these scars of slavery have been removed. And you will never be, speaking to the whites, will never be the human being that you are capable of becoming until white supremacy, this wicked racist philosophy, is destroyed in your minds, and its effect is destroyed in the minds of the darker people of the world. So we all have to undergo some process of renewal. And then perhaps we can look at each other not as whites and blacks and Christians and Jews and males and females, but human beings created in the image and the likeness of God, hoping to become his image and likeness.
The World Friendship Tour, he asked about that.
Pardon
He
me?
asked about the World Friendship Tour.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
I wanted to know a little bit, where do you go and what have you covered, a little bit more?
When you say what have I
No,
covered?
where do you go from here now?
Yes,
Was
well,
this the last stop or what?
the last stop for now, I want to go back to the United States and sort of face what I have to face there, you know, since my going to Libya to accept the Gaddafi Prize. As you know, I did not accept the monetary gift that comes with it, and we were not permitted to accept whatever the monetary gift that Brother Gaddafi would give to the Nation of Islam. We were forbidden to receive it. So now that leads to a court battle, and we intend to go back to the United States and try to fight the good fight to bring that money in, that we may use it with the help of our skilled people in America to invest that money to begin the process of rebuilding the cities and, of course, investing in the Caribbean as well as in Africa. Then I hope either the latter part of this year or the early part of next year to visit Central America and other parts of South America. And then the last stop I would like to visit is North Korea, because I want to see the effect of sanctions on that country. I understand that they're having quite a difficult time in North Korea, and I'd like to go and see for myself.
Do you face any kind of prosecution when you get back to the States for a trip to Libya at all?
Well, there are some members of the U.S. Congress that are pushing to have me prosecuted. I don't know what the basis of that prosecution is, but there are those who are pushing to have that done. And whatever it is, with the help of God, we will face it, and with God's help, we'll overcome it. Yes, sir.
You,
Your name?
Sam Dunkel from Share. You had gone to Africa and the Caribbean. What's your assessment of the situation there, and what can black people do to help themselves, and what can the leaders do to attract brains to go back and help build?
Well, first, I'll take your last question first. A politically stable environment is absolutely necessary. Intellectuals do not flourish under military dictatorships. And since there are more brilliant Africans and brothers and sisters from the Caribbean outside of the Caribbean and outside of Africa than in the Caribbean and in Africa, we must try to attract these brilliant brothers and sisters back, that they may make a contribution to the development of Africa. And that will not happen as long as there are coups and counter-coups and military dictatorships and immature democracies. We really have to grow up into a real responsible democracy. And then, of course, the law of the dollar, or the franc, or the pound is very, very attractive. And it's unfortunate that most of us in our process of education have been told that the better we are educated, the more money we can receive for our education. So we look at education as a means to the house, the Mercedes-Benz, the good life. And so if that house and Mercedes-Benz is not offered in the African country, then we flee abroad to pursue the good life, and I put that in quotes, and we run after paper. And oh good, I have a $5 bill from Cuba with Antonio Maceo, one of the black generals that fought. But this is paper. This is a symbol and not the substance. The real substance in Africa is under the foot of the people. The real substance in the Caribbean is under the foot of the people. And until we recognize that this is symbol and not substance, and instead of running for this and a car and a home in the country of your former master, go back home and develop your country and its wealth and put that wealth into the service of the people. Then you won't be poor and raggedy and hungry looking to white folk to be your savior, but you'll be looking to God and to yourselves. And so black people in Africa, the leaders, have to mature to see that corruption in any form is the enemy of the development of the people. And all of us are finite. We're going to pass away. And for us to hide money away in Swiss banks or American banks or whatever bank for our personal aggrandizement, and then we die, and you know, you can't make use of your Rolls Royce or all your money that you stash away. So the greatest thing you can do is work to build for the country, for the nation. And this pettiness, this personal greed is a sickness that every leader has to overcome. And we, like the whites, are now having new experience at governance. And we are making mistakes like those of our predecessors. But if we don't overcome these character flaws, then we will never be able to attract the good people back. In fact, if some of the governments were not so corrupt, there would be money around to give the intellectuals and those who can develop the country the kinds of salaries that would make it attractive for them to return home. And lastly, we must put in the people a sense of patriotism. And we must evolve beyond the tribe, beyond the tribalism of religion, and beyond the tribalism of party, to see what is in the best interest of the nation. And if we would rise beyond that to see what is in the best interest of the nation, and then the nation what is in the best interest of the community of nations, then we'll become human beings. And then you'll see the divine spark in the human being. And then the earth will be a safe place for all of us to live in.
This is the last two questions. The young lady and then yourself.
Bianca Jacob, Share newspaper. Minister Farrakhan, I'm from the Black Press here in Toronto, and we have a really hard time. Too often we find our government, organizations, other ethnic papers, they want to say who should speak for us and elect our leaders. And what advice can you give to the community to allow them to support the leadership that they choose, and at the same time send a message to these institutions?
Well, one of the things about a slave master mentality, they always want to pick the foreman or the driver man over the slaves. And what most slave masters have always tried to do is to develop a bourgeois class that will be a buffer between the whites who control and the blacks whom they seek control over. So in England, in France, wherever you've had a colonial power, they always want to be in the position to pick the leader. And they will pick the leader who will submit to the thing that their overlords desire, whether that is in the best interest of the people or not. And when a leader rises from among the people that has the interests of the people at heart, the slave master will use the influence of media, unfortunately, to destroy the reputation and kill the influence of that person whom they fear is antithetical to their interests. So, sister, our people have to become much more enlightened to our self-interest. Our self-interest is not in the leaders that white folk pick for us. Our self-interest is in the leaders that we choose for ourselves. But you will not do this until you awaken to your own self-interest. And one of the things that slave masters always do is to make the slave think that the slave master's interest is theirs. And that's why many of the leaders really are not spokesmen to them on our behalf for our hurt, but they're apologists for them to us for our hurt at their hands. So that maturity has to come by writers like yourself. But when you have these black newspapers or black periodicals, whites will invest in it through advertising, because your own people won't advertise in their own people's newspapers to give you a strong editorial voice. So when others advertise in your paper and you say things in your paper that they don't like, they threaten you that they will pull the ads. And you cannot afford to have your advertising pulled, otherwise your paper goes out of business. So you have to be very careful how you speak, and therefore you muzzle the truth.
Not with our paper.
Thank you. And that should be with all black newspapers, just as white newspapers should not allow themselves to be muzzled. You have to speak the truth to the Canadian government. And let me say, while I'm on that, I'm very grateful that the Canadian government is standing for her own sovereignty by refusing to go along with the Helms-Burton bill. I think it's one of the most arrogant bills that shows that America, in her power and her greatness and no other balance for her in the world, is becoming blinded by her arrogance and is doing things in the world to alienate her friends and her neighbors. Canada has always been a good neighbor of America. But for America to dare to tell Canada and the corporations in Canada that you will be punished if you deal with another sovereign nation, I think that's going a bit far. And now the relations over this will be strained if the Congress tries to implement the punishments that the Helms-Burton bill has laid out. But the unity of the Caribbean, Central and South America with Canada and some of the European countries, that unity saying no to this will force America to rethink that law. And again, the nations need to stop being a rubber stamp for America's foreign policy initiatives. You must stop this. And you must think for the good of humanity and not for America. And so if you went along with sanctions on Libya simply because they are called terrorists, that is wrong. If Libya agrees to release the nationals, even to Canada, which is a third country, to be tried, why wouldn't you try those nationals of Libya so that the families that lost their loved ones could get some closure to this, and the truth might come out as to who is really guilty. And if the Libyans are guilty, then punish them, but don't punish them in advance of truth being made known in a court of law. This is wrong. And for any nation to go along with this to satisfy America's foreign policy objectives, it shows that you're weak and your sovereignty is not what it should be, and you're just going to be a rubber stamp for Western or for America's foreign policy initiatives, and it's not going to bring good to any nation that goes along with her when she's wrong.
This has to be the last question.
I'm sorry that we don't have more time with you because I've got so many more questions, but let me ask you, sir, you
Give me a
stand up-
list of some of your questions. I'll try to answer all of them as quickly as I
All
possibly
right,
can.
I'd love you to clarify the statements that are in the Sun this morning saying that crack cocaine was introduced by white people as a means to imprison your people. I'd also like to ask you, sir, you stand up against the U.S. administration and many of the power brokers in the U.S. Do you feel fear for your own life because of the very strong statements that you make?
Okay.
And will you
First,
come back to Canada?
okay. There is an article now that was in the Final Call newspaper, and members of the Black Caucus in the United States have, and a Congressional Black Caucus, are very, very angry over the revelation that the CIA brought crack cocaine into the black communities in Los Angeles and spread it across the nation over the last 10 years to draw money from the black community to foster two things, maybe wars on the outside and the destruction of a group of people that they fear the rise in our numbers. It is the CIA, again, when the Soviet Union collapsed, many of the CIA operatives that were in Europe were brought back to America, according to what I read in the newspaper, to focus on the gang problem. And of course, with the proliferation of guns and drugs, there was the rise of gangs and gang conflict. And people have lost their lives all over America. And now when I go back, I want to sit with members of the Congressional Black Caucus and see whether we should bring a class action suit against the United States government for every one of our sons and daughters who's on crack cocaine. If the government had a hand in it, then we ought to work with this government to make sure that they never do this damnable kind of behavior again. In fact, the government of the United States has been and is today the worst enemy of black people, and really she's becoming the enemy of the American people at large. And that is why in the last presidential election, 65% of the American people who were eligible to vote didn't even participate in the election because they're opting out of the system, and there's hatred in the American people for their government. And that's why you find the rise of the militia, the rise of these groups inside the country that will use terrorist action, I mean domestic terrorism, to get back at America. This is a very sad commentary for a great nation like America, but we have got to bring the government face to face with her sins. And my life doesn't matter. You know, I was born to die. But I know this, that if I'm killed, there'll be a hell of a price to pay for America or anybody who takes my life. Believe me when I tell you that I'm not in front of you of myself. There is a God backing me. And I'm telling you, if anything happens to me, watch what happens to America. No, no, no. I said when I was in Iran that America is a preserved area, not for China, not for Russia, but for God. And I stand in America as that link. And if you bother me, watch what happens. That's my warning to the government of America and my warning to you. If you don't like me, then leave me alone, because there's a price to pay for my life. It is precious in the sight of God. You will know it when you come after me. You will see what you never thought you would see. You have no power that you think you have. And America doesn't have the power that she thinks she has. There's another power in the world today, and you soon shall come to know. Thank you very much. May God bless you, Canada, as I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Members of the press, if you would just hold on for 1 second as the minister leaves. Also, Minister